He used to believe that if you walked carefully enough, spoke gently enough, loved quietly enough, you could survive almost anything. He was wrong. Sometimes you do everything right, and still lose the place you thought was yours by birth. He never imagined the person who would quietly tear my family apart wouldn't they be a villain in the traditional sense. No shouting, no cruelty you could point at. Used a child with wide eyes, a soft voice, and tears that arrived exactly when they were needed. Her name was Lily. Or at least, that's the name my parents gave her when she entered our lives. Mine is Claire. I was their biological daughter, born into that house, raised in it, memorized the cracks in the ceiling, the sound of my father's keys at the door, the smell of my mother's cooking on Sunday afternoons. That house was my world. Until one rainy afternoon, it quietly stopped being mine. Lily arrived on a day when the sky couldn't decide whether it wanted to pour or cry. She stood at the door with a worn-out backpack and a medical file tucked under her arm, congenital heart condition stamped in cold black letters. My parents pulled her into their arms like they were reclaiming something fate had stolen years ago. They kept calling her a miracle. A blessing. A second chance. No one asked how I felt standing there, watching my place shift an inch to the side, then another, then another. At first, I tried to be kind. He really did. He told myself she was fragile, that she'd already been through more than most people ever should. I told myself love wasn't a limited resource, that there was room for all of us. So I learned how to step back. He learned how to lower my voice. I learned how to smile when the attention moved past me and settled comfortably on her shoulders. If Lily cried, the room changed. Conversations stopped. Bloods froze halfway to mouths. My parents' faces tightened with worry, like someone had pulled an invisible string. If I cried, someone would sigh and say, "Clyde, don't be dramatic." That was the first lesson I learned. Her tears meant pain. Mine meant inconvenience. Lily could break a glass, knock over a vase, come home with failing grades, and all it took was a trembling lip and a soft "I'm sorry" for everything to disappear. If I dropped a pen, my mother would look at me like it disappointed her on a molecular level. He learned to swallow things. Words. Reactions. Anger. Hope. And the more I swallowed, the smaller I felt, like I was slowly folding myself into a shape that took up less space. The moment that truly cracked something inside me didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with a pair of shoes. He was 16 that year. He saved my allowance for 6 months, skipping lunches, turning down movies with friends, all for one thing. A pair of sneakers he wanted forever. They weren't flashy, but they were mine. Something I chose. Something I earned. On my birthday, I opened the box in my room, alone, and held them like they were proof that I still mattered to myself, even if no one else was looking. That night, we had a small celebration. Cake from the grocery store, candles that burned too fast. Lily was laughing, running around the living room, full of life. At some point, she stepped on my shoes. Mud, wet and dark, smeared across the white fabric. He snapped. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Used a sharp intake of breath and a "Why would you do that?" She froze, then immediately burst into tears, covering her face, saying she just wanted to play with me. The room turned on me. Says younger, Clyde. It's just shoes. Why are you so selfish? He stood there, feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. That was when it hit me. 6 months of saving, of denying myself small joys, was worth less than her tears. That night, I cleaned the shoes in silence, water dripping onto the floor, my own tears mixing in, unseen. That was the night I stopped trying to be a good sister. He stopped asking to be understood. Stopped hoping someone would notice the quiet ways I was breaking. From then on, I put everything into school. If I couldn't be loved, maybe I could be undeniable. Gratis became my armor. Achievements my voice. He studied harder than anyone. When I scored high, my parents nodded, distracted. When Lily barely passed, they praised her effort like she'd climbed a mountain. The contrast was constant. He was expected to succeed. She was celebrated for surviving. The real blow came the year I qualified for a city-level academic competition. Top 3 students, chosen to represent the school. It was my ticket out. Scholarships. A future. Freedom. He was preparing my application when my mother called me into the living room. My father sat there quietly. Lily stood behind them, eyes already red. Your sister wants to try this competition too, my mother said softly. But there is only room for one from each family. I felt my chest tighten. She didn't make it past the preliminary round, my father added. But she really wants this. And then came the sentence that ended something inside me forever. You raise stronger. You have more chances. Let her have this one. I looked at Lily. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The same performance, perfected over years. I smiled. Of course I did. Sure, I said. Let her go. They looked relieved. Proud, even. Like he'd passed some invisible moral test. They had no idea that when I walked out of that room, something irreversible had happened. From that day on, I stopped dreaming out loud. I prepared quietly. I applied to other scholarships in secret, worked nights, saved money no one knew about. The day my acceptance letter arrived, full scholarship overseas, I read it alone. No chairs. No hacks. Just me, shaking, trying not to cry too loudly. I packed in silence. A small suitcase. Clothes. Books. Everything I needed to leave a house that had already left me. The morning I left, no one noticed until I reached the door. Where are you going? My mother asked. To the airport, I said calmly. I'm leaving today. They stared at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Why didn't you tell us? Because no one asked. And I walked out into the rain. The rain followed me all the way to the airport, light at first, then steady, like it had made up its mind. I remember standing under the overhang outside the terminal, suitcase at my feet, watching families hug goodbye, parents adjusting scarves, siblings arguing over snacks, all those ordinary scenes that felt suddenly foreign to me, like I was watching a life I'd never been invited into. No one came to see me off. No last-minute call. No rushed footsteps behind me. Used me, the sound of wheels rolling across concrete, and a boarding pass with my name printed neatly on it, proof that at least on paper, I still existed. On the plane, I took the window seat. I always did. It felt safer to have something solid to lean my head against. As the aircraft lifted off, the city shrank into a blur of gray and lights, and I felt something hollow open up inside my chest. Not pain exactly. More like the absence of something that had always been there, even when it hurt. I didn't cry. Not then. I think part of me had already cried everything out. When I landed, the air felt different. Colder. Sharper. The language around me sounded like noise rather than words, syllables sliding past my ears without meaning. I followed the sign slowly, gripping my documents like they might vanish if I loosened my hold for even a second. My dorm room was small. Narrow bed. A desk that wobbled slightly if you leaned on it too hard. A window that faced another building, close enough that I could see into someone else's life if the lights were on. That first night, I sat on the bed with my suitcase still unopened and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of laughter in the hallway, doors opening and closing, voices rising and falling in a rhythm I didn't yet belong to. Dinner was instant noodles. I burned my tongue because I was too impatient to wait for them to cool. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so minor could still hurt, after everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tracing imaginary lines, replaying moments from home I swore I didn't miss. My mother's voice calling me for dinner. My father's cough in the evenings. Even Lily's soft footsteps in the hallway. The realization hit me then, sharp and unexpected. You can leave a place and still carry it with you. Classes started quickly. The campus was huge, buildings spread out like they expected you to already know where you were going. I didn't. I got lost on my first day, standing in the rain again, clutching a map that might as well have been written in code. Students passed me in groups, laughing, umbrellas bumping into each other, faces familiar with belonging. No one noticed me standing there, shrinking into my jacket, pretending I wasn't on the verge of tears. That was the first time I understood something important. Loneliness doesn't announce itself loudly. It just settles in, quietly, like fog. I learned how to be invisible again, only this time it wasn't because someone pushed me aside. It was because I was new, foreign, and remarkable. In a strange way, I felt safer. No expectations. No comparisons. No one waiting for me to fail or succeed. I threw myself into routine. Morning lectures. Afternoons in the library. Evenings working part-time at a small diner near campus. I washed dishes, wiped tables, smiled at customers who never learned my name. The money was barely enough, but I treated every paycheck like it mattered, because it did. Each bill paid was proof that I could survive on my own. That I didn't need Johnny's permission to exist. There were nights when exhaustion hit so hard I'd sit on the bus ride back to the dorm and feel my body sway with every turn, eyes heavy, hands smelling faintly of soap and grease. I'd look at my reflection in the window, face thinner, eyes darker, and wonder if I was losing myself or finally becoming someone real. Success came quietly, though. A perfect score on an exam. A professor asking me to stay after class to talk about a paper I'd written. Being offered a small research assistant position. Me, there was a brief flash of pride, followed immediately by emptiness. There was no one to call. No one waiting to hear the news. I bought myself a small cake one night. Used us less, really. Lit a single candle in my dorm room and sat there watching the flame flicker. I didn't make a wish. I just let it burn, because for once, I wanted something to stay. As the months passed, the sharpness of the loneliness dulled. It didn't disappear, but it became familiar, like a scar you stop noticing until someone touches it. I made acquaintances, study partners, people who nodded at me in the hallway. Still, there was a distance I didn't know how to cross. Growing up had taught me one thing very well. Don't ask for too much. Then, 2 years after I left, my phone buzzed with a message I hadn't expected. It was from my mother. Are you okay? We all miss you. Used one sentence. Simple. Polite. As if nothing had happened. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, memories rising uninvited. The shoes. The competition. The living room where I learned how disposable I was. I didn't reply. The messages kept coming. Missed calls. Photos of family dinners. A picture of the living room with an empty chair, placed just a little too deliberately. We're waiting for you to come home. Standing at a bus stop one evening, rain misting the air, I felt the old ache stir again. The part of me that still wanted to believe that maybe, this time, things could be different. But then I imagined myself back there, stepping carefully again, shrinking again, loving quietly again, and the answer became painfully clear. I sent one message. I'm doing well. Thank you. I have a life here now. I wish you peace. Then I blocked the number. It hurt more than I expected. And it healed more than I expected. Not long after that, things began to change. My work was published in a small academic journal. I received recognition, then invitations. Opportunities I never dreamed of when I was still counting allowance coins. I learned something surprising. When you stop begging to be chosen, people start noticing you. The day everything came full circle happened at a conference. A big one. Hundreds of attendees. Professors, professionals, people whose names were printed in textbooks they once studied late into the night. I was nervous, pacing backstage, notes trembling slightly in my hands. And then I saw them. My parents. And Lily. They were seated near the front, faces frozen in disbelief as they recognized me walking onto the stage. I heard whispers ripple through the audience. That's her? She's impressive. For a moment, I felt something close to satisfaction. Then it faded, replaced by something quieter. Savvy. After the presentation, my mother rushed toward me, tears already forming. Clyde, she said, voice breaking. We had no idea. Please come home. We need you. He looked at Lily. She stood behind them, eyes dull, confidence gone. Ida later learned she hadn't made it far. Expectations had crushed her in ways no one prepared her for. In that moment, I understood the final truth. They didn't want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back because they needed me. He smiled gently. I already have a family, I said. Myself. And I walked away. I didn't run after them. I didn't turn around. I didn't wait to see if someone would call my name one last time. I walked out of that conference hall the same way I had walked out of my childhood home years earlier, calmly, steadily, carrying everything I needed inside myself. Outside, the air was cold, sharp enough to wake you up. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, letting it sting my lungs, because pain like that felt honest. Clean. Nothing like the slow suffocation I lived with for most of my life. That night, I went back to my apartment and sat by the window for a long time. The city lights stretched out below me, glowing and distant, like stars that had decided to live closer to the ground. Somewhere behind those lights were my parents, probably replaying the scene in their heads, wondering when exactly they had lost me. The truth was, they lost me all at once. They let me go in pieces. Didn't they feel triumphant? That surprised me. They imagined this moment before, imagined myself standing tall while they stood small, imagined some dramatic sense of justice. But what I felt instead was quiet. Heavy, but not painful. Like closing a door gently rather than slamming it. In the days that followed, I noticed something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at them. Not at Lily. Not even at the past. Anger takes energy, and I had spent too many years exhausted already. Life went on. It always does. I returned to my routine. Research meetings. Lectures. Long nights working through data sets that refused to cooperate. Small victories that only mattered to me and a handful of people who respected my work, not because they were obligated to, but because I had earned it. One afternoon, I was sitting in a park near campus, taking advantage of a rare free hour, reading a book they already read twice but loved anyway. The kind of book you read not to learn something new, but to remind yourself of something you already know. That's when a little girl ran up to me. She couldn't have been more than 6. Hair in uneven pigtails, knees scraped, hands slightly dirty. She stopped in front of me and held out a small wildflower, the kind most people wouldn't even notice growing between cracks in the sidewalk. For you, she said, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. I froze for a second. Something in my chest softened before I could stop it. I took the flower and thanked her. She nodded seriously, as if she'd just completed an important task, then ran back to whoever was watching her from a distance. I sat there staring at that flower for a long time. It was fragile. Imperfect. Already starting to wilt. And yet, in that moment, it meant more to me than all the apologies I never received, all the praise that came too late. It wasn't given out of obligation or guilt or need. It was just given. That night, I placed the flower in a small glass on my desk, next to my notes and certificates and carefully stacked books. It didn't belong there, really. It didn't match anything else. And somehow, I'd made it perfect. It reminded me of something I had taken far too long to learn. Love that has to be earned by shrinking yourself isn't love. Love that only appears when you are useful isn't love. And love that demands your silence in exchange for acceptance isn't love either. Real love doesn't keep score. It doesn't ask you to disappear so someone else can shine. I stopped checking my phone for messages that would never come. I stopped wondering if my parents thought of me on holidays, or if Lily ever missed having someone quietly absorbing the blame for her mistakes. Those questions lost their power when I realized something simple and terrifying. Even if they did miss me, it wouldn't change what happened. And that didn't need it to. There is a strange kind of grief that comes with accepting that the people who were supposed to protect you never really saw you. It's not loud. It doesn't crash over you like waves. It sits in your chest and asks to be acknowledged. Once I did, it loosened its grip. Years passed. Not in a dramatic montage, but in ordinary days. Meetings that ran too long. Coffee that went cold. Laughing quietly with colleagues over shared frustration. Building a life brick by brick, without an audience. He became someone I was proud of. Not because of titles or awards, though those came too, but because I no longer abandoned myself for anyone else's comfort. Sometimes, late at night, memories still surface. The living room. The shoes. The competition. My mother's voice asking me to understand one more time. I let those memories pass through me now, like old songs you don't skip but don't sing along to either. They don't own me anymore. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my parents sold the house. The one with the cracked ceiling and the familiar smells. That surprised me more than it should have. Edith thought that house was permanent, like the roles we played inside it. Turns out, nothing is. Lily faded into the background of life the way many people do when no one is rearranging the world for them anymore. I don't wish her harm. I never did. She was a child shaped by circumstances just as much as I was. We were both products of the same imbalance, just standing on opposite sides of it. Understanding that didn't excuse what happened, but it freed me from needing a villain. One evening, while walking home after work, I caught my reflection in a shop window. Older. Kame. Softer in places I used to keep armor. I stopped and looked at myself properly. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. Losing my family felt like the end of the world once. Like proof that something was fundamentally wrong with me. But standing there, watching people pass by without knowing my story, I finally understood the truth. Sometimes losing a place that hurts you is the only way to find a place where you can breathe. He didn't find a perfect life. He found a real one. With quiet mornings and heavy days and moments of doubt that still creep in when I'm tired. But I also found something I never had before. Peace that don't depend on being chosen. If you're listening to this and you feel like the extra piece in your own family, the one who's always expected to understand, to give in, to make room, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not difficult for wanting to be seen. You are not selfish for refusing to disappear. And you are not broken because the people who should have loved you couldn't. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying and enduring. It's living and becoming. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If any part of it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away to save yourself, or are you still standing at that door, wondering if it's okay to leave? If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it tonight. And thank you, truly, for listening.